Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Near Memo, episode 205. Amazingly, I'm here with Mike Blumenthal as always, and today we have a special guest, Mel Atia from GatherUp. Welcome, Mel.
Thank you so much for having me.
GatherUp is also our second sponsor after the Transparency Company, which we're very grateful to, and we thank them for sponsoring us for the last 3 months. And now GatherUp is our next sponsor. And Mel is a guest today, in addition to being here to talk a little bit about an upcoming event that they're doing, AmpUp, a virtual conference coming up in the next couple of weeks online. Mel, why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you work in local SEO or digital strategy and you care about how reputation impacts search, trust conversions, how AI will impact your business, if you operate a digital agency, you really won't want to miss AmpUp 2025. And it's on May 14th and 15th. It's totally free. It's hosted by us at GatherUp, and it's all about building, managing, and defending your online reputation in a way that drives real business outcomes. You'll be hearing from people who actually are doing the work. So we're so happy to have you, Mike, present about local SEO theory and praxis. We also have other agency sessions that cover sales systems, leadership buy-in, how to deal with fake reviews, also how to embed AI into your agency for effectiveness, and how reviews actually really influence Google rankings with Joy Hawkins. So whether you're agency side or in-house, you'll walk away with sharp insights and real tactics you can apply right away for your business. So just head over to go.gatherup.com/ampup2025 to save your spot. So again, it's go.gatherup.com/ampup, all one word, the number 2025. And it's free, and I would love to see folks there.
And Mike,
And
so
Americans are welcome?
Absolutely.
Good.
Everybody in the world is welcome.
Are you Canadian, Mel?
Yes, I am. I'm French Canadian, actually.
Oh, well, bienvenue. There we go.
Merci. C'est gentil.
Okay. So Mike, tell us a little bit, give us a preview of your session. What are you going to be talking about?
Well, I'm going to be positioning sort of a theoretical view of Google's local algorithm, expanding on the proximity, relevance, and prominence ideas, and then moving from there, given that theoretical framework, move into some specific difference makers that you might see in local, things that you could do that should impact either your rank or your conversions.
And I appreciate, as I said before in the green room, I appreciate the use of the word praxis in the title of the session. So what are a couple other noteworthy sessions, just real briefly, that people won't want to miss?
Yeah, so we have a session called Content Strategy Evolution. How do you balance SEO needs with brand authenticity? Like, this is one of the big things where you're challenged in, how do I make sure that I get found, but I don't get my brand voice lost? And this is a big deal for small businesses that work with agencies, right? You don't want to just have a robotic, poor experience that just comes through your Google search results. So how do you marry these two things together? And we have...
It reminds me of that old joke about the three SEOs that walked into the bar, pub, cocktail lounge.
Exactly. And order the whole entire menu because...
I've never heard that one. That's very funny.
Yeah, so we have both perspectives. We have folks from Fuse 32 and Podiatry Growth. So these are like real people doing the work, bringing information forward. But we also have how to get internal buy-in, right? Some folks are still struggling to showcase that reputation shouldn't just be left to the business because the businesses are so busy with everything else, including operating their business. And it should really be owned by marketing, whether that's a digital agency or a group within the organization. And so how do you sell that? How do you bring that forward, especially with today's reality? I know, Mike, you're going to be talking about AIO reviews, and it's basically just boiled up review and reputation information at the top, right?
Well, and another thing that we talked about before we got started today that I think is really important to point out is just the volatility kind of at every level that's going on right now with Google, as they respond to various external threats and challenges, and they're completely redoing everything. Everything is up for grabs now, and people need really reliable information about where the market is going, how to navigate it. There's so much kind of dubious advice out there, and what you've got, I think, is a roster of really solid people that can help agencies understand what's happening in the marketplace and as I said, sort of get ahead of it. So it's well worth attending. It's free. You can watch sessions on demand, and so there's really no reason not to dip into this, especially with our very own Mike Blumenthal talking about the theory and praxis of local search.
Yes.
I was a political theory major in college. Well, I did psychology and political theory, which is sort of a version of philosophy. And praxis was a word that was frequently used in my classes. And so I'm just gratified to hear Mike using it again. All right. So Mel, you're going to join us for the rest of the session. We're
Absolutely.
very happy that you are. And so Mike, we're going to be talking about the Yelp survival of the motion to dismiss, which is a very big deal. Everybody's focused on the default search antitrust case, which is now in its remedies phase, and a lot of exciting things happening there. The ad tech case, which they just lost in Virginia, also in federal court, that will do a remedies thing in, months from now. But Yelp is the first sort of antitrust case around SEO, or local SEO rather, local issues, including advertising, that has come up. And we're now going to move into the discovery phase. So we're going to talk about that. We will be talking about some of the monkey business going on with AIOs, AI overviews, and then finally about ChatGPT's shopping, which I think is very interesting for multiple reasons. So Mike, what's happening with Yelp?
So, from Yelp's point of view, big win last week when Judge Susan Van Keulen of the Court of Northern California issued a ruling that dismissed Google's motion to dismiss the case that Yelp brought against Google last fall. The primary claims are allowed to go forward, which is that Yelp is a monopoly and their behaviors are
Google's
egregious.
a monopoly.
Google's a monopoly. Yeah, Yelp would like to be, but they're not. Google's a monopoly and their behaviors have disadvantaged competitors and resulted in consumer harms. They did agree with Google that the tying claim was, which is when that Google was using regular ads to sell local ads and search to increase local search, were time barred because of the statute of limitations. But they didn't agree that the main case was time barred by the statute of limitation because Yelp made no claim as to when Google achieved a monopoly in local and local ad markets. Google would have had to say, Yelp claimed that certain actions like universal search were egregious behaviors, but they occurred in 2007, various other ones 2010. Google would have had to have agreed that both they were those egregious behaviors and that they were a monopoly, which they weren't prepared to do in local search. Now, the question of whether local search and local ads is a market is one that you've raised before, Greg, but apparently Judge Mehta in his case against Google determined that SVPs, vertical providers, SVPs, were in fact a distinct market from general search. So there is some precedent indicating that
certainly sounds like it. Yep.
That it is a market, although she didn't rely on his ruling for precedent, but she did consider it. So it's possible that could go some other way, but it's a major thing that she's going to let Yelp argue. As you pointed out, they're going to move to discovery and some sort of negotiations. The negotiations are going to fail because of the parties involved. And it's the discovery that's really interesting, that I think will be really interesting, because all kinds of stuff about how local works, about how local ads work, etc. Now, one thing Yelp has to prove is that Yelp became a monopoly within the last 4 years, or Google became a monopoly in the last 4 years. That's the statute of limitations. Or they have to prove that they've continued the egregious behaviors, which
that's
essentially
more likely
resets the clock, right? So
yeah, that's more likely.
That is much more likely.
And in these cases, what the court is typically relying on is just market share data. And in terms of local, there's no question that Google is 80%. They have some overwhelming number of reviews. They have overwhelming traffic. So I think that's not going to be terribly difficult to show.
And because Yelp has a practice, like you can't solicit actively reviews for your business on Yelp, like that goes against the terms and conditions. So it's almost, I feel like their own practice is preventing them from getting momentum. Like folks care about having recent, fresh, relevant reviews, but if you can't solicit them, how do people decide to go on Yelp and leave a review if they're not prompted? Like folks forget.
Well, Yelp does prompt you, but they will prompt you themselves after you've been to a business or something, but it's very soft. It's not. How was that business, or Libra? I forget the verbatim language, but they
don't let businesses. Yeah, they don't want businesses to solicit. I mean, Yelp is a company of contradictions. They relied very heavily and very early on sort of their own group of people, their local, whatever they were called, their local guides.
Yeah, they were. It's the local guides is.
Yelpers, I don't remember.
Yeah, no, it's the.
How soon we forget, right?
But that
I
reminds
know it's
me of Foursquare, where it's like, oh, I check in. I have to like actively have an app, acknowledge that I'm there, and then take an action. It feels
local. Sorry, Mel. Local elite squad or something.
Yelp
It was
elites. Yelp
Yelp
elites.
elite squad. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, Yelp has, I mean, they, we're up against significant competition with Google. Google did a masterful job of dominating reviews subsequent to 2014, and Yelp has really slowly declined. I mean, that's part of their argument. They've moved into other areas, obviously, like, scheduling and quoting and other SaaS type things. But this is an interesting case in a number of ways. I mean, if Google loses and Yelp wins, local search as we know it could dramatically change. The pack could become populated with Yelp results, for example. Local ads, particularly LSAs, which we in our research have seen are very compelling to consumers, taking people away from organic results and from local results. And they're an example of the kind of exclusionary behavior that Google is doing that might actually get them in trouble, because that's actually fairly recent in lawyers. It also the outcome in the United States could influence EU, Japanese, Turkish, UK regulators to look more closely at Google's relationship with SVPs, which they haven't done other than a few verticals. And it could set a precedence for suits by TripAdvisor, Glassdoor, Angie, et cetera, to sue.
Well, anybody in a kind of comparable position to Yelp in a certain way.
Right. Yeah. As what's considered an SVP. And it may also impact their ability to introduce new AI features to local search, particularly features like AI overviews or learn something specific, because those are by their nature exclusionary, and Yelp would contend that they're damaging to their ability of Yelp to participate in Google search results. So there's a lot of possible outcomes if Yelp were to win this case. It's not a slam dunk. Google is obviously powerful and understands the law very well and has a lot of lawyers working for him. But it's
Right,
interesting to
and
watch.
can I mean, even if Yelp succeeds, then there's a delay. We see the remedies trials
Right.
take months later, and then there's appeals, and so as a practical
Absolutely.
matter, maybe these things never get implemented. In terms of the revelations, we saw some just really profound revelations about the way Google operates and its algorithm coming out of that default search case. That's where they acknowledged that engagement or click behavior influenced rankings, which was something they had always denied. And people put two and two together about brand search and clicks and why some of these outcomes are the way that they are.
And the big news about engagement, right? That engagement increases rank through
Yep.
Chrome, right? Which is why the DOJ wants them to sell Chrome.
Well, and right, and
later.
one of the things that has come out of I think it's coming out of the remedies piece right now going on, is that that engagement data has been a factor in how those AI overviews get put together. There's search data in there, and there's engagement data, whatever that means, click data or whatever. But what I started to say was, we're not going to see any of that stuff out of the Yelp case unless there's a trial, because the discovery won't get revealed. So it has to come out in the form of trial exhibits or testimony at the trial. And so they have to we want them to go to trial. We want them not to settle the case, because selfishly, we want to see all the local search dirt that will come
I
out.
would venture to guess that Jeremy Stoppelman is not very interested in a private resolution either.
Well, he wants to punish Google, and he wants exposure of all this information, right?
Yes, he does.
Yeah.
So it'll be 18 months before the trial, and then another 6 or 9 months for adjudication of what it means, assuming Google loses, and then appeals. But the information will come out as part of that jury trial, probably the end of 2026. So
and we'll get real time.
Stay tuned.
We'll get real time.
Yeah.
Anything, Mel, you want to add to that? We're not giving you too much room here.
No, this is super interesting. I'm actually learning as you're talking about this.
All right. Okay, so Mike, you wanted to, so with AIO Monkey Business, as I described it, lots and lots of research about AI overviews, their impact on click behavior, and so on. We know that when AI overviews appear, especially in mobile, people are less likely to click. Google is saying engagement is increased, there's more clicks. I think the reality is you have a smaller volume of clicks, but you may have more qualified clicks coming out of AI overviews. But there's certainly a lot of instances where it's a zero-click situation. But what are you what are you talking about here, Mike?
So historically, when you went into Google and you clicked on the link, you did a brand search, clicked on the link to see reviews, or just typed brand like beef and barrel reviews, Google would bring up a form of one box that would highlight these reviews in summary form, making third-party sites relatively visible because the one box at the top was fairly abbreviated. You could click to go in and see more.
This
However,
this is
this is an example of how it was or is up to this point. Now we're starting to see tests where Google now, when you do that brand search, or when you click on the review link, this was reported in Barry Schwartz's roundtable the other day. If you click on the reviews, you're taken to another query for the brand plus review query, thus increasing Google's query volume and showing this AI overview of pushing Google's box down the page and obviously pushing third-party stuff even further down the page. This is the kind of ongoing exclusionary behavior that Yelp might be talking about in their trial. But what's interesting to me in this is that they give a good summary of the top, but it's also interesting because they'll go into great detail here. Each of these is unique depending on the business, depending on the reviews. But when you go down and you look to see where these are coming from, they're coming to a large extent. Well, maybe Yelp is providing them. That would be interesting to Yelp. But they're also, Barbara uses local review schema on her site. It happens to be from GatherUp because I used to, co-founder GatherUp, as well as Google reviews. But first mentioned ones are based on the schema on her site. So, which is interesting. It may be sort of make schema great again moment, make local review schema great again moment if AI overviews rely very heavily on schema, local schema on your site. So, but it's interesting, not clear to me how this is an improvement, the verbiage over the stars and the rating number, but
because people love AI overviews, Mike. Everyone loves them. That's why it's an improvement, because the more AI overviews we see, the better we like it as an audience. I mean, this is contrary. This is, in fact, not only is it kind of not exactly, I mean, I was going to say something sort of more eloquent than this, but this is contrary to user intent. This is not what the user is looking for.
It's hard to know, right? I mean, you've talked about the new feature at Amazon where they can give you, where the chatbot gives you some sort of Rufus gives you some sort of
that's
summary.
different though. That's different. You have to actively engage that. They don't default to that. And the benefit of that, as well as like ask Maps about this place or learn something specific is there's a query box that you engage with or don't engage with, and you can ask questions. I mean, I think the idea of summarizing AI kind of ingestion of reviews and then being able to ask about reviews, what are the things, the negative things that people say about this business, or tell me what
you're saying the summary is against what consumers want. This pure text, blah.
Throwing this block of text that is really not what, if I'm asking for, I mean, Mel, I'm sure you would tend to agree, and feel free to jump in here. If I say brand X reviews, I want to see the friggin' reviews. I don't want to see some narrative discussion of the reviews.
Yeah.
I want to see the reviews.
It would be like, well, this is nice. I want to go and see the critical reviews, right? The critical reviews are interact with all the time because they want to know, what am I getting myself into? And what is the critical review about? Is this something manageable? Is this like a critical review that doesn't really matter because it's unrelated? And how is the business actually interacting with the critical review? Like, are they actually responding to it? Are they making good on it? Or are they ignoring their folks?
And I would add, Greg, that what Mel just described occurs in the United States. In our research, somewhere between 20 and 25% of consumers who say reviews are important do what Mel says they do, and they go in and they actually read them. But the other 75%, the reason they're attracted to local service ads and the reason they like review stars and ratings is they see that as a quick proxy for quality, and they frequently use it that way. So most consumers don't want too much, as you point out, to have to deal with. They want the quick visual cue that this is, and then given the choice to dig in if they want to.
I think one way that this could be improved is if it's like, okay, we'll summarize the critical ones, like why, and like when was the most critical review left.
Yeah, unfortunately, with Barbara's case, I mean, she really does. You look at all the reviews. I mean, she has a 4.9 at Yelp. Who has 4.9 at Yelp?
No one.
4.9 at Facebook, 4.9 at Wedding Wire, right? Or
But
5.0
then
at
this
Wedding
is
Wire.
interesting because it's aggregating third-party websites. So it's not just relying on its own reviews that it stores itself. It's kind of making the case that you need to manage like if you're over indexing on Google and you're not paying attention to all of the other places where people can be talking about you, you're
You,
leaving yourself open and quite vulnerable.
yeah, I mean, I think totally you need to not simply focus on Google. I mean, Google is dominant. There's a whole debate going on right now about, well, does AI really matter? It's a teeny little infinitesimal fraction of Google's traffic, and Google is the still the 800-pound gorilla, and that's where you need to concentrate your efforts. But that's not strictly speaking true. I mean, there's enough data now, behavioral and survey data, to indicate that people are kind of all over the place looking for information about whatever the topic is: business information, travel, doctors, lawyers, what have you. And interestingly, this is just a quick aside. One of the Bright Local recently released, and we talked about in the most recent newsletter, another consumer survey where they basically reaffirm that Google is dominant in local and general search. But what they found, interestingly, was that for younger audiences, Gen Z in particular, 10% of people are defaulting to ChatGPT as their primary search engine. And the numbers are slightly lower in local, but in local, interestingly, the number 3 position for Gen Z, this is not everybody, this is just Gen Z, the number 3 position after Google Maps was TikTok. And those are just 2 sort of directional indicators that the market is really definitely diversifying, and people are looking at social media, younger users in particular. People are going to all kinds of sites to get information, and often they will go to multiple sites to validate what they see in one place, whether it's on Google or somewhere else. So you're absolutely right, Mel. That was a very long-winded way of saying you're right. I could have just said you're right.
If one day Google will end up being sort of like the boomer thing, like I'm Gen X, and so I use email, right? And now I work in a culture where it's all Slack, and it's very boomer to go to email. Like, will Google turn into like the boomer tool to go and search? That's what I'm wondering.
I think yes is the short answer. There are many demographic differences, and that will maybe get more pronounced as we continue on. And this is something that we've said and other people have said. You really need to understand your audience's behavior. You cannot make assumptions about what people are doing. You must understand, whether that's through behavioral data or survey work or interviewing your customers or looking at what the reviews are saying, is another way to get that perspective and to more deeply understand your audience. You have to do that now. You cannot take anything for granted.
And you can't assume that they're just going to look at Google or just one place. Folks are getting really savvy. I think it was Think with Google released last year research showing that folks take about 6, don't quote me, but it's something along the lines of 6 to 12 actions before engaging with something that's new to them, whether it's a brand or a product. And most of those tend to be like reviews on the service, product, or company. And so they diversify the resource, like where they go and look for this information. So they're a lot more savvy. They're taking the time to research, and they're going in a lot more informed in their decision.
And one way to achieve that diversity fairly simply from a technical point of view, at least in terms of ChatGPT and the other chatbots, is by using local schema on your site, doing first-party reviews on your site, in addition to what we've seen consumers respond to is third-party reviews on your site as well. In other words, consumers like seeing that on your site, like reading about you, whether it's first-party or third-party.
Yeah, because people find you with your reputation and they choose you with your reputation. Like, it's 2 important components in the buying journey.
Right. And one sort of background comment that I'd make before we go on to our kind of final item here is that a lot of people, that there's an enormous burden that people feel now in terms of all the information. There's decision fatigue. There's a kind of cognitive load problem, which Google is exacerbating with AI overviews. I mean, some people look to AI overviews, I think, for simplification, but just the clutter on the Google search results page, the myriad sources of information, the need to look at all these places. This is from a consumer perspective. I'm doing a series of interviews with people in sort of the healthcare arena about how they find doctors, and there's just too much information, and people are struggling to do due diligence and process it, and they're looking for simplification. And this is the promise of AI, really. And Google is trying to emulate that, and I think they're struggling because they're trying to manage maintaining the old system with all the ad revenue and clicks, and sort of migrating to the new system. But one of the things that AI offers is this tremendous simplification in terms of how you interact with information. It gives you a high degree of personalization. It allows you to ask very specific questions. You don't have to deal with you deal with the information in your way, not in the way that it's being presented by the publisher, by the directory or whatever. And go ahead.
You need to get on to the third point. Otherwise, Mel's
Yes.
going to bail on us
All
before
right.
we're done.
No. The third point is very quick. So ChatGPT introduced this week, I think it was on Monday, they sort of upgraded their shopping capabilities, which includes product pictures now, images, more detail about the products, and buy buttons, most importantly. So you can now shop for things and literally click a buy button and go buy something. And Amazon is one of the options. Walmart is there. It depends on the category. They also indicated that they're going to have a merchant feed relatively soon. They had like 20 some categories of products that they were going to accept feeds for, which I think is quite significant. And they also said, don't opt out of our crawler if you want to be part of shopping. And this is a significant upgrade, which doesn't perform all the time in the same way in terms of the physical presentation of information, but it's a significant upgrade from what existed before. They're sort of catching up to Perplexity, which has introduced a sort of a shopping experience, but only for this paid product. This is ChatGPT's, I think, is free for everybody. And I think there are going to be a lot of people who use it because you can go the entire funnel on ChatGPT. You can say, I'm looking for a piece of luggage that'll fit overhead in the compartment that's affordable and durable and this color and has these features. And it will respond to that in ways that search cannot currently. I mean, you could go over to AI mode or go to Gemini and sort of have a similar experience. And then you can compare products. I want to see this one and this one, show them to me in a grid, compare them. What do the reviews say? What do people like? What do people not like? And then you can buy them. And it collapses the entire funnel. And that's not something you can, people love certain aspects of Google Shopping. And of course, you could always go to Amazon. But Amazon is one of the choices. Why would I go to Amazon when I can do all the sort of research and due diligence and then still buy it on Amazon? I don't have to deal with all the noise and all the advertising that exists on Amazon. So I think it's quite significant. And the final point that I would make, and you guys can kind of opine, and then, we can end, is that this merchant feed to me suggests that they may do something similar for business information. So there's always this question, are they going to create a portal or a place where you can upload your business information directly, or do multi-location business feed a la Google Business Profile? And I think this merchant feed suggests that they're thinking about it, or maybe it's even in the pipeline. You can feel free to disagree with that.
I mean, the question I would ask about the merchant accounts or the business listings is, can't they just as easily get them either from TripAdvisor, Yelp, Apple,
Yes.
wherever,
Yes.
Google?
Yes.
Do they need to do their own? I mean, or is it that you're saying they're going to tie in the business listing with the inventory so that
they're not
accurately...
They're not mutually exclusive. They're not mutually exclusive.
Right.
I mean,
because
I think
historically what it's been doing, when you start, like I've often done these high level queries, like I want, what type of emergency backup heat could I get for my house? Well, let's look at wood pellets, let's look at wood burning, right? We go through that whole thing. And then at the end, ChatGPT has been saying to me, gee, would you like us to look? We know you live near Salamanca. Would you like us to look for a provider of that product, right? So it's been doing that. It hasn't been doing it with inventory, but it has been finding businesses that meet that.
Mel,
I think that they are in a position where they have to find revenue. They have to find revenue beyond their subscriber base. AI is expensive to run, so I see this as a smart play from them. It's giving me Yahoo directory vibes a little bit, like paying to be listed, paying to have access.
Well, that's unclear.
Yeah.
I mean, that's certainly a possibility. I mean, I don't think there's anything unethical about saying there's a small fee that helps us process your information or whatever.
Not at all. I don't.
I mean, they would have to disclose that it was a paid inclusion thing.
Yeah, I think at this point, the quid pro quo, let us index your site, give us your feed, currently is the best play for them. But like with Google, that's a bit of a slippery slope where in the end, it could very well and very well likely will limit web traffic to your site, put you in direct competition with your with your other local businesses selling the exact same thing. And I think in the end, it may not be that good for small business. I mean, I think that the ideal of an open web speaks to me. Maybe that's because I am a baby boomer, but somehow all the transaction occurring within ChatGPT or within Google is not, it doesn't speak to how I want to shop.
The transaction doesn't happen in ChatGPT. It happens on the site. The buy button is on ChatGPT.
Yeah.
So you click through to Amazon, you click through to Walmart, you click through to whatever independent retailer.
It's almost like an aggregator. Like, if you go to like
it's the same thing Google is doing. Same thing Google is doing.
Yeah.
Perplexity does host the shopping cart, I believe. I haven't bought anything on Perplexity. But I think the idea of crawling the web and getting local business information that way, or local inventory information that way, and there's a separate conversation about local product inventory, or getting it from directories, right, which I think they're doing to some degree, or getting a feed from Yelp or TripAdvisor or whomever, and then also having a place where you can directly upload and correct and manage your business information. Those are not mutually exclusive. I mean, I could be completely wrong about this, but it has that vibe to me. It sort of points in that direction, and I think it's a really interesting thing. I didn't think they were going to do that. I think that was I assumed that would just be too much of a hassle for them to manage.
Well, they probably noticed that people were doing exactly what Mike is doing, which is chatting with ChatGPT, asking for recommendations, and they're like, okay, well, clearly I can even take you a step further and have you go straight to the vendor.
Well, when I looked for when I looked for when I did the luggage search that I just described, I said, "Can you tell me where to buy that in my area?" And what they showed me was retailers that they thought would have the inventory and essentially store locator information. And then they had the disclaimer, you want to call them up, make sure you check to make
right. What you're suggesting would tie it all together in a more precise and likely of accurate output.
Yeah, and I mean, I think anyway, we're sort of at time. Mel has to take off. I think there's much more to say about all of this, and I think it's really interesting, and the market is moving very fast. And so I would encourage you to register for AmpUp,
Yes.
so that you can stay on top of what's going on, especially if you're an agency, if you're a digital agency. A lot of great content for them. And thank you. Go ahead, Mel.
Thank you so much, folks. If you want to register, it's go.gatherup.com/ampup2025. Thank you so much for having me on this podcast. This is so fun. And I'm glad that you got me to stay for the whole thing.
It's the most fun you ever had, undoubtedly.
For today, absolutely.
All right.
Well, thanks, folks. I appreciate you.
Yeah. Thanks for being here.
Cheers.